Hello, everybody. Welcome to ISACA Live. This is our monthly emerging technology rendition that we do of ISACA Live. Last time we talked about IoT devices. This week we're talking about artificial intelligence, or AI. My name is Dustin Brewer, and I'm the Senior Director of Emerging Technology and Innovation at ISACA. And joining me today is Frank Downs, the Senior Director of Proactive Services with Blue Voyant. Frank, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always exciting when we get to talk, right?
It is.
So I just wanted to kick it off here real quick with, basically when we talk about AI, what do we mean when we mention AI? Like, what is that technology and kind of how long has it been around and what is it? We'll get into what it was used for and everything. But so AI has been around for a really long time, at least the idea of it has, right? It actually kind of kicked off the whole computing revolution and Alan Turing creating his machine and that kind of kicking off everything that has happened with computing since, right? The idea that a computer can think like a human being, right? It's obviously that idea has evolved a lot since then. And we've been able to make a lot of different strides in the technology ever since. For example, I think one of the biggest examples that we all saw that was kind of like a worldwide shock was when IBM created its Deep Blue chess playing machine that actually beat the world champion in chess, right? So we actually created a computer that was able to defeat the best human being at doing this, very logical, I don't want to say repetitive, but very logical game of different stances and different, it kind of was, there was a lot of rules. There's a lot of rules that go into chess. I'm not very good at chess.
Same.
I don't know. Chess and I'm a lot better at checkers, I think. But
that's what my son told me the other day. He goes, do you know what the most hardest, and keep in mind, he's 6. He goes, do you know what the hardest version of checkers is, Daddy? They call it chess, right? I mean, that's, and I like that you brought up Deep Blue there too. Also, because let's not forget, then they did Watson, right? And then even put it on Jeopardy, which was nuts, defeating everyone. That's
right. And now we have this, it's definitely evolved since then. We've been able to break it out of kind of just this this defined set of rule sets that AI can now use. And when we talk about AI, and we'll get into this a little bit more in the next question, but a lot of the times we're really talking about machine learning, and there is a difference there. As machine learning is definitely a subset of AI, and it definitely helps perpetuate the kind of next generation of AI. But we're starting to see this kind of utilization of AI in these really big projects like the Human Genome Project. We see it, in finances and in predictive technologies as well. Frank, did I miss anything there? Anything else you want to add to it?
I think it's interesting, right? Because you brought up machine learning, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think a lot of people have this kind of romantic idea, this glorified idea of AI. And when you take a look at it, a lot of what you see today, really, that's being labeled AI is kind of just really, really, really good or really bad, depending on who you ask, machine learning, right? It's like this whole idea where when you come down to it, it's a lot of if-then statements or if-then statements and just a big collection of it. And that's where a lot of people put this whole idea of AI, where machine learning and then AI kind of, how do I phrase this? Where machine learning becomes AI or something like that, where a lot of people like to differentiate is in the whole idea of inferencing, right? Taking something that it's learned over all the if-thens, shown something completely different, and it can infer to an extent, right? And how well the AI does that. Now, you see different levels of success and so forth with that. For example, what was it? Facebook made an AI to learn language and so forth. And over time, it invented its own language. And they're like, got to turn it off. Yeah, you don't know what it's saying anymore. It's talking on its own. So there is definitely, I think, a line there somewhere between where machine learning ends and AI begins.
Right.
I think, though, a lot of what we see today that is labeled, though, as AI is machine learning. So I think that's something interesting to think about as we are talking about AI and the different elements of it in general and trying to apply it as a tool.
Yeah, and absolutely. And that actually brings us to our next question here, which is, how is AI being utilized right now in cybersecurity and IT audit? So cybersecurity, I'll kick it over to you. If you're going to talk about kind of how you guys use it or how you see it being used in the cybersecurity field.
I would say very, very carefully is the answer. And you see it a lot in a lot of different ways with cybersecurity, with whether we're talking about managed detection and response, MDR, right? Or we also have the capability here to do automated pen testing. And I say automated carefully, but it's really neat, the things that we're seeing and that we can apply to different things. Now, as they're applied, you see, from what I'm seeing, you see something that is consistent across the field. It is a, how do I put this? A workforce magnifier, an efficiency magnifier, right? You have this whole concept that a lot of people are saying, oh no, computers are going to take our jobs with AI and so forth, when that's not the case at all, especially in the field of cybersecurity. Because, I mean, ISACA has these great reports, the white paper, the state of cybersecurity, right? I love it. It's one of my favorite reports that ISACA does. And I'm not just saying that because I got to write one, right? But it has great stats in it that shows the real shortage is in people. So, okay, that's more important right now, because everyone's saying, oh no, it might take our job. There's not even enough people to fill the jobs right now. And also, when you look at how these different capabilities with AI are applied in the field, it's just like everywhere else. It can help make an individual or a process more efficient and more effective, rather than just replacing that individual or process completely. That's how I'm seing it.
No,
as far as the audit field, I mean, what are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. It's I wrote this article on IoT recently, and I kind of mentioned the ability that IoT gives us as human beings to kind of have this cognitive offloading effect, meaning that we're able to kind of forget about the mundane and repetitive tasks, because there's something else out there kind of doing it for us, and we're able to focus on the bigger tasks or the more important tasks at hand. And I think AI provides that. And we've seen AI, AI is utilized a lot in the financial industry, especially in financial audit, to find anomalies, right? Like when you get that email alerting you that your credit card was used at a particular area, that's actually machine learning and AI kind of learning your habits, right? And learning like Dustin just used his credit card or his debit card in Florida, and now all of a sudden he's in North Dakota pulling out $500. There's something off here, right? And it's usually spot on. Sometimes we get false positives on it, as we do with anything, right? But it's learning, right? It's like our collective baby here. So the other thing, the way we see that, right, the way we see it and use an IT audit is the same, right? We see the ability to kind of digest these huge stores of information and go through them and find any kind of anomalies, find any kind of issues, find something that might stand out or not be within the norm. So Matu here said that AI is awesome, but blockchain is the future, right? Totally agree, Matu. But AI is part of this like brand new ecosystem that we're seeing kind of coming out, right? So when we talk about emerging technologies and why something is an emerging technology, I mentioned that AI has kind of been around for a really long time, right? Why is it still an emerging technology? Well, blockchain's been around for kind of a long time too, not as long as AI.
Have you been making copies of things or Xerox? Right?
Yeah.
That's
so, but this ability to have like within cloud to have these like big data stores and to actually utilize those data stores, that's kind of like it's creating these new ecosystems, right? Where we have these abilities to store data, to process data, to store. Blockchain is one of those things, right? It's a huge amount of data, right? I can't remember what the Bitcoin blockchain is currently, but terabytes and terabytes and terabytes, right? But so we kind of see all these technologies kind of starting to meld together and starting to actually help perpetuate each other into their next versions.
And it's weird to see the adoption rate too, because AI, ever since it's come out, they're like, oh yeah, we're bringing it on board and so forth. And it's been, kind of this thing that's in the background that's kind of moving slowly. Whereas blockchain came on and everyone's like, oh wow, yes, let's figure out a way to put this in, because it gives you're seeing that when we're talking about the CIA triad, right? It gives you something really good when you're talking about the integrity, to keep the integrity of that information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I get excited about that too.
And this kind of rolls us into, so we've kind of talked about the, how it's being used within cybersecurity and IT audit. And it's funny, like we haven't really talked about how it's being used in kind of those higher end things like risk and governance. And obviously they all bleed into each other for sure. But when it comes to AI, like we mentioned before, it's kind of used for those more, again, I don't want to say mundane tasks, but kind of the more repetitive tasks of like going through, looking at logs, looking at user behavior, being able to map those out and being able to find those statistical anomalies, right? Because it really is kind of this convergence of algorithm and data, and then data analysis, right? It's kind of
exactly
all that into the hands of the machine, which sounds scary. But
it helps you work smarter, not harder, kind of.
That's
thing,
right.
Especially when you have so much data that's coming at us, right? What was it? You and I have talked about this. One of my favorite quotes was at one of the ISACA conferences, where they said the internet gets a little bigger every time someone turns on a new device. right? And with so much data there, you need these aids. You need something like AI.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have time to go through and do all these different things, right? So this is something that can hopefully, as it progresses and learns and grows, hopefully it's something that can kind of take a lot of this stuff off of our hands. With that being said, it's not all rainbows and butterflies, right? We see some adversaries utilizing AI as well. So one of our other questions here is, how is it used for nefarious purposes? Like, how do hackers use it? How is it being used kind of out there in I don't want to just say non-traditional, but I guess nefarious was the best word to use for it. So how do you see it being used in a nefarious way?
So there's a couple different ways that we're seeing it kind of emerge as an aid also for malicious actors, right? First and foremost, it does help enable, as we just mentioned, the everyday tasks of things, right? It helps these organizations or actors, whoever they may be, do things more efficiently. So when you're talking about rolling out something like ransomware, right? AI can help identify those targets more quickly. When you're talking about one that really helps out the malicious actors and has gained it's interesting because you see the way it's gaining some steam in both sectors. There's the realm of deepfakes. And with deepfakes, it is getting more, and we're talking about leaps and bounds over and over and over each year of how much better deepfaking is getting. Now, this has its This has its good uses, right? Things that can actually help for legal operations. What was it? I read an article the other day where Bruce Willis wants to be in movies, but he doesn't feel like acting in them, so he's given his approval to deepfake. You can't make that up, right? And what was it? Also, if you take a look at the new Star Wars show, Mandalorian, that wasn't the current age Luke Skywalker we all saw. They didn't freeze him, right? That was a deep fake. So there are the positive things, but then you see deep fakes for when we're talking about how this can take advantage of people, and you see it a lot online with malicious actors when they want to actually forge something. What is it? We see a lot of people are misled with misinformation campaigns. It's implemented a lot with if you're trying to mislead individuals, as a certain politician hypothetically said something, or not hypothetically, if you look online, right? If you look online, it's not hypothetical, it's there. A lot of misinformation and disinformation campaigns rely heavily on those, and you'll see those rolled out as well. But those are two of the big ways that I'm seeing it that are emerging and are here, to be perfectly honest. With the amount of computational power available, it's not going anywhere.
Absolutely. And the other thing that we kind of see, and Frank, this is something that you and I are really close to, is the ability of hackers to kind of model human behavior and model patterns of life of people within an organization, right? So if you know somebody's not at their desk at 5:00 p.m. on a Friday, right, which is most of us, hopefully, then that's kind of an area or a time of vulnerability. That you might be able to call somebody or try to do a social engineering attack on someone as well. So there are other uses, and that we're kind of seeing this pattern of life being utilized to map using AI and machine learning to map out someone's pattern of life and to map out how a company functions as well. Matu had a follow-up question for me on the last thing that I said. He said, how will AI and blockchain fit in? Well, really good question, and it kind of goes along with what we're talking about right now. We recently saw the largest cyber heist in history, right? $600 million on the Poly network. I think it was cross-chain, but I think it was mostly Ethereum. Right. And so they didn't catch it. The guy kind of came forward and was like, hey, I just stole $600 million, And
he's like, sorry.
So far, he gave most of it back, right? But the way we can kind of see those two technologies going together is you could have some early detection happening within blockchain systems if something doesn't look right? If patterns are going off, if something else is happening. It's the same as financial, utilizing it in the financial industry, right? To see if these funds are being moved all of a sudden all over the place. What's going on here? And the AI could actually have some early detection, early alerting capabilities there. Another question we have here is, I am passionate about learning the application of AI in cybersecurity, mainly in networking security, intrusion detection, et cetera. Can anyone help me identify resources? ISACA has lots of really good resources. We actually have a white paper that's coming out on this exact subject coming up pretty soon. We don't know the exact release date, but it should be before the end of the year. And that's in the works right now. So keep an eye out for that. Frank, do you have any other suggestions on where they could
Well, if you want to get a jump start on learning things like network intrusion detection systems and so forth, and how to configure them so you can put your AI in, you should check out the CSX training at ISACA that we have.
There we go. We got that too.
It's fun, and I'm not kidding, by the way. It's really fun, and you get to do the hands-on stuff. It's not just abstract in reading a book. You actually get to go in and configure these things.
Absolutely. And so going into our next question here, and this is a big one. This is kind of one that's it's really in the zeitgeist right now, where everybody's really interested in it, is the ethics of AI. Right. And what are some of the known issues that we've been seeing with AI?
I think that's a really good question, because, and you kind of set it up earlier when you said AI kind of is our collective baby, our robot baby, right? And just like, kids that you have, they learn from you, from what you say to them, what you do with them, and how you treat them. Now, I'm not saying any computer is a baby or human. That would be insane until the robots, rise up and new babies are made of robot. Anyway, but just like that, everything that you present to it, right? The whole goal here is that it can learn, it can infer based off what's being said. You have to look at these things like a blank slate. And there's interesting elements to this, because one, you have to make sure that, you want to control as best you can what goes in so that you can get the best result possible, so the AI can learn as quickly what you want it to learn. That said, also they can be susceptible to a few different things. One, if someone dumps in a bunch of bad information, it's totally going to wreck everything. There was one that Microsoft put out a chat bot, and then I want to say probably 5 years ago at this point, and a bunch of users from the internet spewed just like garbage into it, and it turned into just a horrible bot, and then Microsoft had to bring it down after a few days. Same thing with anything that you're putting together here. And what's really crazy is when you are you being you don't know what you're not mentioning. So what's that? There was the old Donald Rumsfeld quote: "There are known knowns and unknown unknowns," right? Known unknowns and unknown unknowns, right? Right. You don't know what you don't know, and as a result, that's not getting in as well, which can also make kind of for a deficient AI in certain areas as well. What do you think, Dustin?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the earlier version of that quote would be like the Johari window, right? Where you like have the things you know about yourself, things that you know that other people know, things you know that other people don't know, things you don't know, right? I think that's a little bit more of a psychological thing than what Donald Rumsfeld was saying.
Oh, I'm pretty confident you're right with that.
Yeah. But no, you're 100% right. And I think that what we see a lot of the times when we see the biases in AI and, there's this really quick jump to, hey, what did the programmer do wrong? And it's like, the programmer's like, I created this thing that took these data sets and showed us what these data sets are telling us and showed us these patterns these data sets are making, which is like, oh, the data sets have biases in them, right? It's interesting as we kind of keep going forward in creating AI and then collecting all this data, we're kind of pointing a microscope at ourselves, right? And we're taking a really, really close look at some very specific things about our societies and about how we interact with each other and our different systemic institutions that we have and kind of how those things work together. And we don't always like what we see when it comes back out, right? And for good reason. There are some things that need to be fixed, right? So how do we kind of shift that over to AI and say, okay, we not only do we want this thing to mimic us, we want it to mimic us better than what we have been doing for social responsibility purposes, for many purposes, right? And that is where indeed a programmer, an IT auditor, even a cybersecurity person even can come in and say, okay, we have these great algorithms, they do these things. We need to make sure that the data we're feeding it is vetted. We need to make sure that the output we're getting is the proper output, and that there are no, it's not inheriting our biases that we have as human beings, and that it's actually just finding the best solution for whatever the algorithm is meant to be. So I know that's a lot, and we packed that in as best we could, but we do have to move on to our last.
It's going to keep all of us ISACA members busy. So there's great news.
Good thing. And actually, again, we have another white paper that we're looking into right now as far as auditing AI. Like, what do we need to look at as IT auditors, right? As far as AI goes. So keep an eye out for that. Last question here before we start looking at some of the user questions is, what advancements will we see in AI in the foreseeable future? What do you think?
Oh man, the one that gets me most excited, but is such a hot topic sometimes, is full self-driving. Like the most capable autopilot and your car driving yourself, right? That's the one I'm really excited about, but it seems like such a far off kind of reach. I think, and you may know the verbiage a bit better because we were talking about the cars last week. But I think there's 5 different levels of full self-driving, and level 5, there was a recent assessment is where you just can get in the car and say, "Take me, car, like let's go," and that's apparently a lot further off than everyone thought a few years ago. When you look at all the details and the types of information that are coming. However, I think you are at the end of the day seeing big improvements in AI. So as far as like every day, I think you're going to see big improvements with, and it may be a little long term. With vehicles, autonomous driving, even for safety reasons and so forth, I think you're going to see a lot of it there. As it applies to cybersecurity, I think you're going to see continued integration. Like I mentioned earlier, we right now actually implement some automated pen testing that takes advantage of different, finds exploit it, and we configure it naturally, of course. But if it finds a vulnerability, can it exploit it? And once it exploits that, can it move laterally and things like that? I think you're going to see more of that for cybersecurity services. I think you're going to be seeing rolling out MDR solutions. Again, managed detection and response solutions are going to be a bit more automated thanks to AI and the inferences that it can make. So you're going to see efficiencies implemented there as well, and specifically in the field of cyber.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to see a lot better accuracy coming out. I think one of the things that
Totally.
Everybody is kind of asking, like, what does Tesla do? Right now, they're collecting data, right? And they're going to have the largest data set for automated driving. And that's kind of what you need for more accuracy. The more data you have, the more accurate your statistical analysis is and all your modeling and everything else is going to be, right? I mean, we can go back to the old coin flip toss, and yeah, you might get 4 heads in a row, but the more and more you do it, the more you're going to get to 50-50 heads and tails, right? And that's just, that's just the way that it is. That's the way that statistics work, right? Which is great. Yeah, driving automation, absolutely. Going back into that, I think that's a big part of it, right? It's going to be, I can't wait. I gotta be honest with you. I have road rage.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
I have a Tesla right now, and then when I turn that thing on, I'm like so much calmer in the car because I don't have to worry about it anymore. Like, it's all the good car. I kind of do. You have to keep your hands on the wheels, and yes, you still have to pay attention with that. Of course, it's not at level 5 yet. I don't even know. I think it's at level 1 or 2, right? It's not even that far. But I do love seeing that. But yeah, I think we can definitely expect some more accuracy coming out of these out of the models that these things are creating, as well as a little bit more automation, right? So we're still talking about machine learning in a lot of these sense. You still kind of have to have a human behind the wheel, so to speak, figuratively and actually, right? So even for something like cybersecurity purposes, you still have to have a human that's going through and making sure that it's not a false positive, making sure that, and also, completing the investigation, right? There's an incident response. That's then the person, the human behind the AI who is supposed to go in and do that kind of stuff. So we do, I think we're definitely going to see more automation on that, maybe more automation on the incident response side too, to kind of help us. Oh, well, no, we went and looked, and it's okay. With that though comes the adversarial side, which is like, well, they can model the model and then kind of figure out how to fake it out, right? We've seen this for years. We've used machine learning and detection with antivirus for years and years and years, right? So that those algorithms have kind of already been out there. And every time we create something that's a little bit better, the adversary creates something that can circumvent it. And that's why I don't think the human element is ever really going to go away in a lot of these. Definitely not in cybersecurity anytime soon. Definitely not in audit anytime soon. Right? There still has to be a human being there. Who's the point of a human being to do IT audit is to audit the IT systems, right? So if you have an IT system that's doing these audits, it's not like no. We still gotta audit the auditor, right?
I agree. Yeah, definitely.
Especially if it's IT. So a lot of really cool and exciting things, I think, coming up in the field of AI, specifically for ISACA members, specifically for the IT auditor, the cybersecurity practitioner, and even governance and risk professionals. I think we're going to see a lot of really neat stuff coming out. So let's jump into some of these user questions. We have a pretty good one here. What happens when the robot uprising happens? Good question.
We say thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, robots.
Yeah.
You got it from here.
Are they nice to us? Are they trying to destroy us? Like, are they just like our server? Like, whatever.
I think everyone's got it wrong, right? Everyone's like, oh no, the robot uprising, and they think of Terminator and whatnot, and they're like, oh, they're gonna fight us. What if they're just like, no, we'll take care of you now, humans. So just be nice.
Right. I had the privilege of going to the MIT Sloan School of Management. They do this cybersecurity management seminar every summer. And they had the lead, one of the lead AI folks for Facebook who came and spoke, and he was showing us, hey, here's like the most advanced AI we have, and it's like a Pong paddle going back and forth, and like they got the AI to play Pong against itself. So that's as advanced.
I think we got a while.
There's probably been much more advancement since then, right? Like we probably like it probably does more than plays Pong. Obviously, we can create one that can play chess, right? But there's still very unique constraints that kind of go into that. So I don't think that Skynet's going to be popping down anytime soon. I think we can all relax about that. And but yeah, fingers crossed on that.
It's just what Skynet wants us to think, right?
Right. It's like Frank said earlier, where like Facebook created the AI and it started talking to itself in a new language, and they were like, no,
that's enough of this. Yeah.
Oh goodness. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Okay. How will advances in quantum impact AI adoption? Very good question.
Oh. Well, first, I'm ready for quantum to get here. And I feel like whenever anyone brings up a question on quantum, it's exciting, but I then take a step back and I go, well, I'll see in 10 years when it becomes every day, right? Well, man, if it becomes every day in 10 years, I'll be shocked. But also, I think naturally you're going to have more computing power. That's kind of what quantum brings to the table, right? So the inferences might come quicker and the capabilities will, the logical jumps might become more snappy. However, I think it's still going to be a matter of gathering the data set. The most recent season of Westworld, right? They had that big quantum computer. I think it was. Someone's going to quote me on this. I'm going to be like, no, I saw that episode. It was actually this kind of computer or something like that, and built a big neural net using quantum and so forth. I think quantum and its application is going to be great for a lot of things in the future. As far as AI, just like everything else, it'll make it faster. Hopefully, the encryption will be stronger too, because what we're seeing there with quantum kind of blows my mind. And you want to talk about security? That's going to be nuts. It's going to be awesome. What do you think, Dustin?
Yeah, no, I think that the great thing about quantum computing is that one of the things that it's so hard to wrap your head around, but like when it solves a problem, whatever problem you feed into it, it's eventually, depending on how many qubits you have, supposed to give you basically all possible answers, right? Which sounds crazy. It's so hard to wrap your head around. And I'm sure, again, there's probably somebody out there who's a quantum computer expert who's like, that's not quite how it works, Dustin. You kind of went a little bit. Yeah. But the way that I understand it is that that's kind of how it works, right? So if you think about that in AI, and that AI can basically provide you any possible answer, right? It's interesting to think about, right? And it's one of those things that it will definitely propel it, right? I don't think it's going to destroy it at all. I think we get a lot of those questions like, what's going to happen with security, and what's going to happen with blockchain, and what's going to happen with all these things? When quantum comes out, they can basically break all of our traditional computing algorithms for like RSA and different things that basically secure every communication that we have on Earth, right? Well, we'll have quantum RSA then, right? We'll have the kind of defeating. We'll have quantum blockchain. We're going to have quantum AI, right? It's going to be all these this new ecosystem that we have coming up with cloud and these large data stores and everything else. It's just going to kind of be made better by AI, right? Agreed. So, and if you guys are interested in learning more about artificial intelligence, learning more about quantum, even learning more about any emerging technology, ISACA actually has its Evolve conference coming up the 16th and 17th of November. But we have one more question here. Does the AI fundamentals exam, so this is referring to our certified emerging technology, we have an AI fundamentals course in there. Does the AI fundamentals exam include coding questions? Really good question. And kind of is the answer. I can't really tell you what's on the exam, but I will tell you there is a performance-based aspect to it, meaning that you actually have to jump into a live computing environment where there might be an AI or ML algorithm running that you might have to do something with. The good news about that is that any training you buy from ISACA is going to prepare you for that. So just make sure that you, I'm not saying you have to purchase the training from us, but if you do purchase the training from us, you'll have a little bit better idea of what's on the exam.
I purchase all my training from ISACA.
There you go. Yes.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay, and with that, we got about 1 minute left. I don't think we have any further questions. Frank, any closing comments on AI?
No, I keep an eye on it. I think as long as everyone takes a pragmatic approach to it and realizes that it'll make things easier rather than replace people outright, I think that's the big thing to think about, especially for the next 10 to 15 years. We're talking about efficiencies and enhancing capability more than, removing entire jobs of people. That's my big pragmatic message right there.
No, absolutely 100% agree with you. And also let's add on to that we don't have to worry about the Terminators coming down from the sky and taking us over either, right? Not quite yet, maybe in a few decades or a few centuries or something like that. But yeah, absolutely, definitely keep an eye. Take a look at ISACA.org. We have a lot of really great resources already, white papers. We have our, again, Certified Emerging Technology AI Fundamentals exam and training as well. If you just want to kind of get your feet wet into AI and learn a little bit more about the underlying technology. And of course, our Evolve conference. We have an entire track dedicated to AI, which Frank, I think you're speaking at, but I think you're speaking on the blockchain side of it.
I am. Okay. So it'll be fun.
So come on down and see us at Evolve this November if you want to learn more about emerging technologies. And thank you guys all so much for joining us. Frank, thank you for joining us and giving us insights.
Anytime.